I'd like to point out that nothing at all in the underlying bill states, blocks, stops, even addresses anything about health. It talks about something we need to be talking about, and that's poverty and the effect about jobs and the EPA has. And indeed, they've come before a committee before and said that's not something they pay attention to. Well, we want to make them pay attention to what that does. In May, more than 130 employees at PBS Coal in Somerset County, Pennsylvania were laid off. Third round of layoffs in the company in less than a year. Last week, nearly 400 people was announced would lose their jobs on First Energy by shutting off the Hatfield and Mitchell coal-fired power plants in Greene and Washington County, Pennsylvania, after the company spent nearly $1 billion cleaning them up. They joined about 5,000 other coal miners who lost their jobs in 2012. And it won't just be miners. They're losing their jobs. It's the Boilermakers who are no longer building and maintaining power plants, thousands of laborers, electricians, operating engineers, steam fitters, plumbers, carpenters, machinists, all out of work. They'll be joining those at Joint Manufacturing in Millersburg, Kentucky were laid off in March, or Peoria, the hundreds of Boilermakers there laid off of work. Erie, Pennsylvania, where GE is laying off 950 workers at its locomotive power plant because less coal means less work for the railroads. These men and women are out of work because of the country's 600 coal plants. More than 20% of all coal-fired units are being shut down due to EPA regulations. Now, I'm not one to talk much about my family, but I want to talk about growing up in poverty. Because I remember what it was like to come home to an empty refrigerator, growing up with my 10 brothers and sisters. My mom and dad both working long jobs all the time to try and feed us. And I remember in part motivated by that when I went to college at Wheeling Jesuit University. I oftentimes joined groups to travel throughout Appalachia, helping families in the bleakest kind of poverty you can imagine. In coal towns that were once thriving, but as the mines shut down, miners lost their jobs. And that went true not only in West Virginia, but Pennsylvania, New York, Ohio, Kentucky, Illinois, Tennessee, Virginia, North Carolina, where the poverty is still so bleak in parts of eastern Kentucky that it's absolutely amazing, 3 times the national poverty rate. And when people grow up in poverty, even despite whatever things may come out of the health care bill, they oftentimes, characteristically have more drug abuse, dental problems, chronic depression, cancer. They just can't afford food. They can't afford to live. We see that such families have depression, twice the rate of the rest of the population, higher rates of asthma and obesity because of poverty. Now, here we're talking about that even when things get better in some kids that don't have mental health problems, a recent study by Georgetown University says that they'll have other risks for obesity and cancer and hypertension and stroke and cardiovascular disease because of the stresses of poverty and unemployment. Now, with my colleagues, we want to make sure we're looking at health, and the EPA does a lot of talking about that. All we're asking is these for Americans who are out there. We're going to be told they're going to lose their jobs as power plants are shut down, as coal mines are shut down, and towns move back into incredible, unspeakable poverty. I ask you to look at the eyes of the people who are in poverty of all ages, the young, the old, the in-between, and make the EPA look at their eyes as well. I don't give a rat's tail if they don't have the people right now to do it. They certainly have enough people to come up with some other things. They step into the area of the Department of Energy. Somebody ought to speak up for Americans who are losing their jobs and saying as regulations come through, we ought to find out how poverty affects them, how they can't even afford to live in decent trailers, how we have to send charitable organizations down to put a roof on their house, put a toilet in their house, give them running water. Why are we afraid to talk about those things? I can't imagine why anybody would vote against an amendment that says we want to know what the EPA is doing to put more people in poverty. So what are we going to do? Offer them more food stamps, more welfare, more money for their schools, more other things there? Why not give people the decency of a job and say that when we come up with these regulations, why can't we talk about the effect this has upon jobs, the effect this has upon families, the effect this has upon the future of children, and the struggles they have, and the hopelessness that they have, and the depression they face, and the worries that they have. Let's be compassionate and get back to these issues. And stop talking about the politics of either side on this, and for once and for all, make the EPA And other federal organizations say, we want to know about your war on jobs and the effect upon children. And I yield back.